If you thought the 2024 election cycle couldn't get any crazier, buckle up, because what just happened might be one of the most shocking moments yet. In a recent interview that was supposed to be a casual discussion about foreign policy and the global economy, Donald Trump appeared to let something slip that has everyone, from political pundits to average Americans, talking non-stop. The former president, who has long branded himself as an anti-war, pro-America first candidate, seemed to accidentally confess that he has personally benefited, financially, from the ongoing war in Ukraine. Yes, you heard that right. This was not a statement coming from a political opponent or a late-night comedy show. This came straight from Trump's own mouth before he quickly backtracked and tried to bury what he just said. It was a rare moment where the mask slipped, and it gave us a glimpse into what could be a major conflict of interest at the heart of his rhetoric. The conversation started with Trump being asked about the Biden administration's continued funding of Ukraine's defense efforts against Russia. Normally, this would be Trump's moment to criticize President Biden, slam the spending bills, and talk about how America should focus on domestic issues instead of sending billions overseas. But instead, Trump went into a lengthy answer about how strong the economy becomes when wars happen, and that certain friends and businesses do very, very well. At first, many viewers thought he was speaking broadly about the military-industrial complex, a term he has used before. But then, in a moment that has been replayed thousands of times on social media, he seemed to slip up and add, "We made a lot from that war, a lot, but I don't want to get into it." That's the quote that set off alarms everywhere. The phrase, "we made a lot from that war," was vague enough to have multiple interpretations, but the way Trump said it, smiling, gesturing with his hands, and then quickly shifting to, "I don't want to get into it," felt like a partial confession, like someone who realized too late that they said too much. Analysts immediately began dissecting the clip frame by frame. Was Trump talking about America as a whole, saying the country profited from wartime economic boosts, or was he talking about himself and his business empire personally? That distinction matters a lot. Because if Trump, a man who might be president again, has private business interests tied to companies that profit from military conflict, it raises enormous ethical and legal questions. It also could explain some of his mixed messaging over the past few years, where he simultaneously calls for peace in 24 hours, but also brags about how strong America has been in supplying weapons to allies. Political strategists from both parties jumped on the clip. Democrats framed it as proof that Trump is not really anti-war at all, that he has been secretly cheering from the sidelines because it benefits his wallet. They argue this could be one of the biggest scandals of his campaign, because it ties into a long-standing narrative about Trump using his office to enrich himself. Remember the foreign diplomats staying at Trump hotels during his presidency, or the controversies around his businesses not being fully divested. Republicans, on the other hand, rushed to defend him, saying that the media was twisting his words and that he clearly meant we, as in the United States, not me and my family. Still, even some conservative commentators admitted the clip was a very bad look, and that Trump should clarify what he meant. The timing couldn't be worse for him. With election season heating up, every word he says is under a microscope. The Biden campaign immediately cut together an ad featuring the clip, with ominous music and a narrator saying, "Trump admits he profits from war." Progressive influencers on TikTok and X, formerly Twitter, ran with hashtags like #WarProfiteerTrump and #FollowTheMoney, which went viral within hours. Even late-night hosts, who have been looking for fresh material, seized on the moment. One joked, when Trump said, "We made a lot from that war," you could practically hear his accountant calling him to shut up. Meanwhile, the markets took notice. Defense stocks actually ticked upward the day after the interview aired, as speculation grew that war spending might remain a priority regardless of who wins the White House. This added even more fuel to the theory that Trump's businesses or allies could be positioned to gain from such policies. Investigative journalists began digging through public records, campaign finance filings, and Trump's past business dealings to see if there were any direct connections between Trump entities and defense contractors or suppliers. Some early reports hinted at partnerships and investments that, while not illegal on their own, could look very bad politically if they show a pattern of profiting from international conflict. The story kept growing as former Trump administration officials weighed in, some anonymously telling reporters that this wasn't the first time Trump had spoken about war as a good deal. One unnamed official was quoted saying, he would sometimes say in meetings that war is bad for soldiers but good for business. Whether that quote is fully accurate is hard to verify, but it fits the pattern of how Trump views the world, in terms of deals, wins, and losses. Perhaps the most telling part of the viral clip, though, was Trump's attempt to pivot away from the comment right after saying it. He quickly shifted to blaming NATO for not paying their fair share and criticizing Biden's leadership. This is classic Trump strategy. When caught saying something controversial, immediately change the subject to an attack line that will rile up his base. But this time, the internet wasn't ready to let him off the hook. Memes, reaction videos, and detailed breakdowns of the clip flooded YouTube, Reddit, and news segments. Even conservative media outlets like Fox News had to cover the story, though they framed it more sympathetically. All of this shows that the comment struck a nerve, and possibly exposed something deeper. If Trump does not clarify what he meant soon, the narrative might solidify in the public's mind that he and his circle have financial incentives to prolong or benefit from conflicts abroad. And that is the kind of storyline that can haunt a campaign all the way to Election Day. The fallout from Trump's comments was almost immediate, and it did not just stay online, it jumped into the real world with lightning speed. Within hours, reporters were asking Trump campaign staffers for clarification, and the responses were noticeably shaky. One aide told a major news outlet that Trump's words were being deliberately misinterpreted by the fake news media, while another tried to pivot by saying that what the former president meant was that America as a whole benefits economically when it leads global markets, not that he personally profited. But these explanations did little to stop the speculation. In fact, they made it worse. The more the campaign tried to downplay the moment, the more people went back and rewatched the clip, analyzing Trump's body language and tone, pointing out that his smile looked like someone who was admitting something accidentally. Body language experts were brought onto television programs to break down the micro-expressions in the clip. Several argued that Trump's subtle pause and slight smirk before saying, "But I don't want to get into it," were classic tells of someone who realized they just said too much. Meanwhile, social media kept the fire burning. On X, formerly Twitter, the clip was trending for more than 48 hours under multiple hashtags, with millions of views. TikTok creators began posting their own commentary videos, some doing dramatic reenactments of the moment, others splicing it with historical footage of presidents warning against war profiteering. Instagram meme pages turned the quote into viral posts, and even apolitical comedy pages joined in, treating it like a gaffe on the same level as some of Trump's most infamous unscripted remarks. This is the kind of story that thrives in the algorithm-driven world of short-form content, a single clip that is both shocking and funny enough to be shared again and again. And as more people encountered it, they didn't just laugh. They started asking questions. What exactly are Trump's financial ties? Does he have investments in companies that make weapons, supply fuel, or build military equipment? If so, how much money are we talking about? Cable news quickly picked up these questions and ran panel discussions with policy experts, economists, and former White House ethics lawyers. Several pointed out that, while a former president can legally invest in whatever industries he wants, it becomes a major problem if he runs for office again and doesn't disclose those interests. The reason is simple: the American people need to know whether a commander-in-chief is making decisions based on what's best for the country or what's best for their bank account. In this case, if Trump stands to gain financially from continued military aid to Ukraine or from any prolonged global tension, that could represent a conflict of interest on a massive scale. Some commentators even went so far as to call for congressional hearings to investigate whether any government contracts or policy decisions during Trump's first term benefited companies tied to his empire. But here's where the story took an interesting turn. Trump himself decided to respond, not through a carefully crafted press release, but through a Truth Social post and a rally speech just 2 days later. In the post, he accused the radical left media of lying about him and said that he was proud of making America strong during his presidency. He claimed that what he really meant was that the war had created opportunities for American companies and workers, not for him personally, and that he believes America should always be in a position to benefit economically from global events. During the rally, he doubled down, saying that the fake news vultures were trying to twist his words because they were scared of him winning again. The crowd, as expected, cheered loudly, but even in the audience, some faces looked confused, especially when he spent several minutes ranting about NATO and European countries not paying their bills, which had nothing to do with the original question. It felt like a deflection, and commentators pointed that out almost immediately. The response from the Biden campaign was swift and aggressive. Within 24 hours, they released a new ad featuring the clip of Trump saying, "We made a lot from that war," on repeat, spliced with images of destroyed Ukrainian cities, crying refugees, and headlines about U.S. military aid. The ad's tagline was brutal: "For him, war is a business. For them, it's life and death." It was one of the hardest-hitting ads of the cycle and quickly went viral in its own right. Liberal PACs began buying airtime in swing states to run the ad, while progressive influencers encouraged their followers to share it widely. This created a snowball effect. Every time Trump tried to move the conversation back to the border or inflation, someone would bring up the clip again. Interestingly, even some Republicans began urging Trump to issue a more formal clarification. A few prominent GOP senators told reporters that, while they believed Trump wasn't literally confessing to war profiteering, they thought he needed to explain clearly what he meant so the story wouldn't spiral out of control. Some conservative talk show hosts, who usually defend Trump no matter what, admitted that this particular moment was politically dangerous and that ignoring it would just make things worse. But true to form, Trump didn't back down. Instead, he began framing the entire controversy as proof of a conspiracy against him, telling his supporters that the media and Democrats were trying to silence him for telling the truth about the corrupt global order. This framing, predictably, worked with his core base. They rallied around him, calling the story a hoax and accusing journalists of trying to smear Trump because Biden was losing ground in the polls. But outside of his loyal base, independents and moderates were less forgiving. Polling data that came out a week later showed a noticeable dip in Trump's numbers among suburban voters, particularly those who listed honesty and foreign policy as top issues. Some focus groups reported that the comment made Trump seem reckless and too willing to profit from conflict. That's a dangerous perception for someone trying to win over swing states where voters are weary of endless wars. And then came the bombshell reports from investigative journalists. Major outlets published lengthy pieces tracking connections between Trump allies and certain defense contractors that had seen profits surge since the Ukraine war began. None of the reporting directly proved Trump personally profited, but it painted a picture of a network of friends, donors, and former administration officials who were making millions. These articles were filled with documents, financial disclosures, and interviews with experts, and they went viral as well. For Trump's critics, it was confirmation of their suspicions. For his supporters, it was more fake news. But either way, it kept the story in the headlines for weeks, making it one of the defining controversies of the campaign season. As the dust begins to settle, one thing is clear: this moment is not going away anytime soon. Whether Trump's remark was an innocent slip, a misunderstood comment, or an unintentional admission, it has cracked open a much bigger conversation about money, war, and politics. Americans are now asking tougher questions about who really benefits when the U.S. spends billions overseas, and whether leaders of either party have financial ties that make them less objective when deciding matters of war and peace. For Trump, the stakes are especially high because his entire campaign brand is built on being the outsider who tells it like it is and fights for the forgotten American worker. If enough voters start to believe that he might have personal financial motives behind his policies, it undermines that image, and that could be devastating in a tight election year. But there's another layer here that makes this story even more significant: the timing. With just months before voters head to the polls, this controversy gives Trump's opponents a fresh narrative to hammer home. And unlike some past scandals, this one is easy for people to understand. It's just a clip, a simple sentence, but one that sparks a lot of doubt. That kind of messaging can be devastating in campaign ads, debates, and late-night talk shows. Trump, of course, is not one to back down, and his strategy now seems to be to lean into the chaos, painting himself as a victim of the establishment and doubling down on his promise to end the war quickly if elected. Whether that strategy works remains to be seen, but history shows that when Trump is on the defensive, he often finds ways to turn controversies into rallying cries that fire up his base even more. At the same time, this moment could be an opportunity for voters to demand greater transparency from all candidates, not just Trump, about their business dealings and investments. War should never be good business for those in power, and the idea that someone who might become president could profit from conflict should raise alarms for everyone, regardless of political party. That is why this story matters. It isn't just about Trump, it's about the bigger question of whether America's foreign policy is truly guided by the national interest or by private interests. In the end, this viral clip might be remembered as just another headline in the never-ending storm of political drama, or it could be the moment that forced a reckoning with how money influences decisions at the highest levels of government. Either way, the eyes of the world are watching, and as the 2024 race heats up, this story is likely to resurface again and again. One thing is certain, if Trump wants to put this controversy behind him, he'll need to give voters a reason to believe that when he says, "America first," he means the American people, not his own bottom line. And that, perhaps, is the most important question of this entire election cycle.